So, Robert, why are cult systems important for you to talk about?
Yeah, I'll try to be short. One thing is that when I was in my early 20s, I was part of two different cult systems. One cult system first, and then after a couple of years, I realized, oh, that's cult. I dragged myself out just to go straight into the second cult system, believing that I wasn't doing that. And then after a couple of years, I realized it. And then I worked a lot on kind of a dismantling and understanding what was it in me that was pulling me into cult systems. And then later on, few years, I mean, quite some years later, I started to work as a psychotherapist, and somehow I became very popular among people who were cult survivors. So I would very often have clients who were broken down and really struggling because they just survived, a cult system, or they were trying to pull themselves out, or some sort of what I would call abusive therapists. So there would mostly I would have female clients that were just trying to cope with the pain and confusion they experienced after having worked with a previous psychotherapist who was male and who was sexually or otherwise, kind of stepping over some lines and entering into their field. So I was hearing it from both sides, and somehow my antennas became extremely sensitive since then. So for last, I would say 20 years, I've been walking around like this, with these super sensitive antennas all the time. Kind of detecting the elements of cult in groups. So that's, in a nutshell, my story. And how about you, Ella? What's your story that draws you to this theme?
Yeah, thanks for sharing your story. Mine is that I was brought up in a system, in an organization that I would now describe as a cult. In the US, it's not considered a cult. It's considered an organization that provides workshops on empowerment. But in other countries, it is considered a cult. Like in France, it's considered a cult. So it kind of teetered right on the line. And I think for some people who took a couple of workshops and left, it's just like a lovely organization. And for people like me who were asked at the age of 13 and 14 to start volunteering, to spend as much time as possible there, to recruit as many people as possible, and bring them into the organization, and that my purpose in life was to spread the truth that this organization was providing. And so my history was that I was kind of aware of that system from the age of 6. We would play in the lobby because no one was allowed into the building past the entryway who had not taken the introductory course. And because I was 6 years old, I wasn't old enough to take the introductory course. Therefore, me and my playmates at 6 and 7 years old got to know the receptionist really well. And of course, at the age of 7, I really wanted to take the course because that was the youngest age that you were allowed to take the course. because I wanted to belong, because I wanted to be allowed through the doors to where my mother and the grown-ups were doing whatever work they were doing. And then I got more seriously involved when I was 14, and I became very successful in that organization until I was 18 when I left. And I internalized a lot of painful messages about how to live in the world, what the right and wrong ways were. And the language was very quote unquote spiritual. So they wouldn't say that it's wrong. They would say other words, and there were a lot of implied messages of shame and guilt. My antenna is also very fine-tuned, and I too am a therapist, as you know, and I'm very passionate and curious about power dynamics, in part because of my experience in that organization. So Robert, how would you define a cult system?
First, I just want to say how, I knew a little bit of what you just shared, but just a bit. So now I get a much fuller picture. And I just want to say how it touched me, just this awareness, how incredibly powerful all the messages must be for a child who keeps hearing them again and again and again as they are growing up. How incredibly amplified that must be and how deep it goes. Just this awareness kind of hit me, so yeah, I just want to honor what I heard from you, and what you went through in your journey of first kind of being impacted this way, and then later on finding ways to heal yourself from this. So as for what's for me, in my understanding, what defines an organization or a community as cult, there are a few things that come up to my mind now. Probably there are many more. One is that there is, in most cases, there is a leader. There is a leader, and there is this atmosphere of he or she knows more than anybody else. He or she is more enlightened, very special, messenger from heaven, or something extremely special. And that makes us who are close to this person, that makes us very lucky that we actually got that close. So it already creates this sense of we who are here, we belong, we are the lucky ones, and those who are outside, they don't know, they don't get it. So we need to enlighten them. So there is this strong difference between us and them. So that's one thing. Another thing also that I noticed is the very strong hierarchy, which is often not visible immediately. It's not like there, it's like a hierarchy like in a Catholic church, let's say, where we have Pope and then archbishops and bishops, and it's a very visible hierarchy. And in many cult systems, the hierarchy doesn't need to be so visible, but it's there. For instance, there is lack of transparency. There are secrets. If you're in the inner circle, you will learn about this special spiritual secret, or you can enter the building. If you're in the inner circle and you don't talk with people from the outside, you don't share this because this is ours. So there is this fortress built around that is even more deepening the boundary between us and them, and between up and down, more enlightened, less enlightened. I could say more things, but they are more specific. So I'm just curious now first, to what extent do you resonate with this, and what else you would wish to add?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I resonate with all of it. The word I resonated with the most was the atmosphere of he knows, she knows. And I resonated with this unspoken hierarchy, which can make it more powerful when it's unspoken. It can make it so that first one has to question themselves. Am I seeing this accurately? Is there a hierarchy here? It's not written down. And then that leads me to another aspect of the cult system, which is the powerful kind of atmospheric pressure to question oneself in the presence of any truth that is being offered by the leader or by somebody else who is higher up in the hierarchy, or by just the group of peers in the face of one's own intuition, self-trust, clarity, and things get murky very quickly. From my experience, the moment that a culture is developed in which questioning one's own perception of reality is encouraged.
I'm very, very excited hearing you say that, because that so much also connects to my experience. I would perhaps say that, you know, there is no space for a real dialogue. So let's say if a leader is making a statement and that statement doesn't resonate with me, and I want to say, that's interesting, and I see things a bit differently, that is completely discouraged. That cannot happen. So because if I disagree with a leader, then that means I'm not getting it, or, you know, I have my own problem, or I'm reactive, or whatever terminology is being used. And I want to be very, very open and very transparent, even here in our conversation. Within nonviolent communication, where I'm very much involved as a certified nonviolent communication trainer for many years, and I'm very much involved there, and I keep noticing elements that you know, could potentially lead to invisible hierarchy. And I'm, of course, one of the most excited fighters against it. But it would be something, a person saying, you know, Marshall Rosenberg was the person who started, as we know, the nonviolent communication as we know it. And there would be a member of the organization saying, I remember having had lunch with Marshall Rosenberg 27 years ago, and he told me this. And that becomes, you know, like putting a huge weapon on the table. Now, nobody can top that. You know, I was alone with Marshall Rosenberg, and he told me this, a very personal thing. And it becomes almost like quoting Marshall becomes, there is sometimes, it seems to be a tendency of, you know, quoting Marshall becoming a tool of proving, you know, like the more I have spent time with Marshall Rosenberg, the higher I am in this invisible hierarchy. You know, I'm not saying that this is a conscious wish or intention of a person who is saying that, you know. But looking from this experience with cult systems, it is something that triggers my attention. Like, oh, you know, let me challenge this. Let me invite into a dialogue. Let me try to connect with the person who is now quoting Marshall and try to connect with them. Like, right, so you were really inspired with what Marshall told you, and I'm wondering how are you now? You know, to bring it back into the person-to-person dialogue rather than us competing. Who spent more time with Guru 20 years ago?
Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really resonate with what you said. And as you know, I'm a candidate to be a certified trainer with the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And that's what has brought us together as colleagues, and also what inspires us to talk about this is to look at these potential trappings that can happen with this kind of groupthink or systemic think, that even as nonviolent communication and the principles of NVC talk about a power with model and talk about, you know, connecting everything back to our own needs, there is a certain power and potency when things are implied. Mm-hmm. And so in the example that you gave, I really love that example because the words are said. I was sitting with Marshall and this is what he said to me. And what I'm hearing is that there are these other messages that are implied in there, mm-hmm. which is I'm closer to Marshall, or I was closer to Marshall when he was alive. Therefore, I am blank. And what really inspires me as I, you know, have healed from my relationship to cult systems is the reclamation of our power. So then for me, the invitation is around, you know, why is that experience somehow leading someone closer to what's true? Then I sat and I connected to my feelings and needs. And this is what came up for me. And this is a deeper nuance about nonviolent communication that I've accessed by listening deeply to myself. And so why is one story potentially seen as more valid or valuable, or as a quicker access to a capital T truth than the other one? And so, you know, as I've learned to trust myself, as I've learned to notice those micro moments. So you're highlighting a micro moment. It's just a comment, but to take that and to unpack it and to slow it down and to see the potentially big messages that can be communicated in a very short moment, in a very short amount of time, around status, around mattering, around power with, and to just kind of highlight that, I think is our shared intention. I have experienced in my experience with NVC that there have been times with trainers where I've had a painful experience, or when a trainer has spoken to me in a tone, or even with words that had some, what I evaluate as criticism and judgment. And the first place I go is, they're a trainer, so what's wrong with me that they said blank? And when I go into that place, because of my healing journey, I can immediately put that into a place of, okay, I'm going to do some work there. I'm going to unpack that, because I'm telling myself that because of their role, because of their title, because of their place in the hierarchy of this community, that their opinion about me might be more true than my opinion about me, or than my friend's opinion about me. And so I think our conversation is really an invitation to our NVC community to just really hold consciousness and awareness around these micro moments and around these implied messages that we may not be consciously aware of.